Hey, welcome. In this section, we are going to cover the signs that are inside the Washington State Driver Guide. This is not a comprehensive overview of every sign you'll see out on the roads, just the ones that are inside the Washington State Driver's Guide, okay? Plenty more signs you can find online on the federal highway sites. There's links to it on our website at i5driving.com. Hopefully you've got a copy of this book, right? And make sure your cover looks like this. If you don't have a copy of the book, you can get one for free at a Department of Licensing office or on our website, i5driving.com/guide, lowercase letters please, and that will be the English version of this guide. If you go just to the homepage, i5driving.com, scroll down to the knowledge test section, and you'll see all 7 languages that Washington State produces this guide in. All right. If you have a book, make sure the cover looks just like this. This is the current version, and this is the one we're going to be working on today. If you have one of these older guides that's been on your bookshelf for a while, or somebody you know, these are too old. You don't want to study these old ones for the state knowledge test because there's a lot of information that does not contain, especially on distracted driving, laws regarding cyclists and emergency vehicles. All right. Hey, moving on. We're going to talk about the signs starting on the inside cover. But first, let's cover what the category of signs are that we're going to cover today. First up, regulatory signs. You have to do what these signs say. This is the law. You have to stop here. You can't go more than 55 miles per hour in this sign. So regulatory signs are going to be white background or red background. You have to follow what they say. That's different from these warning signs. They're going to be in yellow, orange, and the new fluorescent green, which is used for pedestrian crosswalks and school zones. Warning signs are suggestions. You should do this. These are warnings, let you know something's coming up. Be ready. So use some caution when you're approaching them. Finally, last category is guide signs. These are going to be ones that help you get to where you're going, tell you where there's some services such as a hospital or a trailer camping, or if you need to know that you've got to get to Trenton, you're going to be exiting to the left in about 1 mile. All right. If you've got your book, go ahead and open it up to the inside front cover. We're going to cover some of these first. These warning signs are mostly what's on this page. These warning signs tell you you've got to be cautious. Use caution when you see these. And when you look at the ones that have the arrows especially, remember to read these from the bottom up. Read them from the bottom up. When we get to the signs that have arrows on them, we'll talk about that, okay? All right, first up, winding road. So instead of just one single curve, these are going to have more than one curve on the road you're approaching. Just a caution. So instead of putting signs at every single curve, they just use one at the beginning to say, get ready for lots of curves on this winding road. Next up, the divided highway begins. Remember, we read these signs from the bottom up. So when you're on a road, it'll look like this. You're on a road that's two-way traffic, and then it'll split apart with a median that separates it. Could be like a bit of grass that you see here in the photo. Could also be a concrete wall barrier of some sort. All right, so the barrier there is kind of what we're talking about when we talk about the median of grass. All right, finally, divided highway ends. Remember, we're reading these from the bottom up. You've got a divider, right, as shown on the sign, and it's also here on the road. Means that it's going to end. You're going to be back to two-way traffic soon, which is a sign you'll see in row 3 here. Next up, the crossroad sign. This tells you of an upcoming intersection where you're going to have cross traffic, traffic that's crossing from left to right or right to left in front of you. It just means use a little caution as you approach. Somebody may be turning in front of you or driving straight across. All right, next up, at row 2, we got merging traffic. Now this one is shown to folks who are on the freeway. If you see in the photo right here, it's going to be shown to people on that 2-lane road in the lower left of the photo. It's not shown to the person in the small car who's on the ramp who is doing the actual merging. This sign is here to alert you. You may have cars that are merging soon. So just use some caution and watch out for them. In Washington State, they're required to yield to you, but they don't often do that. Next up, lane ends, merge left. So in this case, the driver of the yellow car sees this sign and says, okay, I've got to be ready. Somebody may be coming into my lane soon. The driver of the blue car looks at this and says, okay, I've got to get out of this lane. My lane is ending. In Washington State, of course, the blue car has to yield the right of way to the driver of the yellow car. Next up, slippery when wet. So some roads are going to be a bit more slippery than others. In this case, a sign will alert you to that and say, hey, get ready to slow down. If it's wet, the surface is not quite enough to keep your car on the road when it's wet. Next up, traffic signal ahead. When you see this sign, it's usually because you cannot see the traffic light, but you've got to go down a hill or around a curve and might not be able to see it in time if the light's red. And so in this case, you'll get an advance warning sign. There's a signal coming up. Next up, in row 3, we've got hill. More important for large truck drivers. This tells you if you're going down this hill, it's going to be super steep. You may need to change to a lower gear. And if you have a large truck or if you're hauling a trailer in your own personal car, you may want to shift to a lower gear as well. Next up, two-way traffic. The sign's here to indicate that you will soon be on a road that has 2 lanes traveling in opposite directions. So when you see this here, you've got a 2-lane road. The yellow line tells you there's traffic moving in opposite directions on either side. You might have left a road that was a one-way street or an entrance ramp, and the sign's just to alert you you will now have oncoming traffic in the lane next to you. Next up, the school zone crossing sign, or just school crossing. Now remember, in Washington State, you must stop, completely stop, for children in a crosswalk. Not just yield, you must completely stop for children in the crosswalk. Next up, pedestrian crossing. Remember, you must stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk. It wasn't always that way. It is that way now. Instead of just yielding, you have to make a complete stop. Now we'll cover how far across a pedestrian has to get in a later chapter, not this one. Just remember, if you see this sign, pedestrian crossing, remember to stop for pedestrians in a crosswalk. Next up in row 4, railroad crossing ahead. Now it says railroad crossing, but this is really the railroad crossing ahead. This is an advance warning sign to tell you coming up soon there will be a railroad crossing. This crossbuck here, the black and white crossbuck, this is the one where it's placed at the railroad, and it says you must yield to trains. So the yellow sign, railroad crossing ahead. The black and white crossbuck, yield to trains. Next up, watch for bicycles. This is a bicycle warning sign. There may or may not be any cyclists around, but it's a common enough area that has them. They put the sign up to say, watch for cyclists. Next up, soft shoulder. Not one to cry on or lean on, but if you need to pull over to the side of the road, it could be soft with sand or gravel, and it might be hard to get out of there. So the warning is there just so you don't plow into it at 60 miles per hour and expect to get back out easily. Next up, this is similar to the merging traffic sign, except in this case, it's an entirely new lane added, so you don't have to watch out for cars. Cars may decide to jump over the line, like this car right here, making an unnecessary lane change. It wasn't necessary. There is an added lane for them. This is just to warn you, traffic will soon be arriving on a new lane that will suddenly appear on your right. If you put the sign in the mirror, you'll have an added lane on the left. Next up, deer crossing. Typically, these are placed in areas where there's known to be a lot of deer trails and so forth. There are over 1 million deer-related crashes per year. They cause a lot of damage, a lot of expense. A lot of them don't survive either. And so when you see this sign, use some caution. Start looking a little more to your left and right as you drive down the roads. Next up, the simple curve ahead, but it's also augmented with an extra sign, 35 miles per hour or less recommended. While it's not required, it's best to follow this advice. And you always want to go into the curve at 35, not break through the curve, which we'll talk about in a later session. The no passing zone means that you are not permitted to pass another vehicle in this section. You'll almost always see a double yellow line as well, which means you're not permitted to pass anyone or cross over this line unless you're leaving the roadway. So is this driver obeying the sign? Certainly not. Last one in this section, the slow-moving vehicle sign. Now, it's the only one that is not posted on a stick on the side of the road. This sign is mounted to a moving vehicle. It can be a slow-moving one like an Amish buggy, construction vehicles, also vehicles that are towing large things such as propellers, missiles, double wide trailers, so forth. Slow-moving vehicle. Now, before we get to the back cover, we do have some more signs that are inside the book on page 3-3, 3-4, and 3-5. So let's cover those real quick. We don't want to leave those behind. First up, the speed zone ahead. It's kind of a weird one. When you wonder, what is a speed zone? Am I supposed to go faster? Am I supposed to go slower? In this case, when you see this sign, get ready to go slower. So when you see speed zone ahead, the speed limit is reducing from a higher speed to a lower speed. Kind of a goofy photo, but if it was 55 and you'll see speed zone ahead, this is another version of the speed zone ahead sign, which means it's going to be getting lower soon. Speed zone ahead, lower speed. So the other sign will look more like this. Speed zone ahead. It's a pretty common sign. All right. You'll also see some other ahead signs, such as stop ahead. Get ready to stop. So this is also like the signal ahead, where you couldn't see it because of a curve or a hill or some other reason. And these ahead signs will help you to know what's coming up ahead around a curve or a hill. You might have to yield, you might have to stop, you might have to start slowing down. Okay. Next up, the worker sign. So when you see the sign, you can expect to see some folks working near the road. When they're orange, that means they're temporary. They're not permanently fixed to the ground. They're there temporarily while folks are working on the road. Now remember, in Washington State, you must yield to road construction vehicles and people engaged in road construction. You're required to yield to them. Next up, the sharp curve to the right. The chevron-shaped sign usually has more than one placed on the road to help guide you through the curve. And it'll tell you that there's going to be a sharp curve to the right. And also, when you see in the other direction, a sharp curve to the left. So how is that different from the original curve ahead we showed you earlier, right? There's a difference between these two signs, between the sharp curve and the regular curve ahead. First up, regular curve ahead sign will just warn you of an upcoming curve. It might have a speed recommendation, as we did on the inside cover. But the sharp curve signs will warn you of an upcoming curve, but usually has a hazard on the other side. In this case, a lot of trees. And trees don't move when you hit them, so please try not to. All right, other signs from inside the book. The railroad crossing sign we covered briefly earlier. Remember, you must always yield to trains. And the danger is not all crossings are going to have bells, lights, or the gates that come down to block you from driving over a railroad crossing. Especially in busy downtown industrial areas, they'll just have a railroad crossing sign, and it's up to you to look for trains and to yield to them. Lane control sign, you're going to see a lot, especially when you get to an intersection that has a lot of choices for turning left, turning right, or going straight ahead. You'll sometimes have road markings. Those are there to assist you with what you're supposed to do with this lane control sign. This is a regulatory sign, so you have to do what's posted on the sign if you're in that lane. All right, we're moving on to the inside back cover now, the back cover of the book. First up, we'll start with the speed limit sign. In this case, 55 miles per hour. This is the maximum speed you're allowed to travel under ideal conditions. So that means sunny, clear, and dry roads. If it's raining, foggy, dark, other issues going on, perhaps a crash in the intersection, we're not permitted to go this fast. In Washington State, the speed limit law, that's the maximum speed allowed under ideal conditions. And yes, you can get a speeding ticket even if you're driving below the speed limit if you're driving too fast for conditions. Next up, the yield sign. This is a regulatory sign, as most of these are on this page. Remember, you have to let others go first. You must not interfere with their path of travel. Okay, you do not have to stop at a yield sign. Okay, you're only required to yield in all cases to everyone, pedestrians, cyclists, and other motor vehicles. Okay, you may also see this sign looking like this without the words. This shape is only assigned to the yield sign. Next up, you see a lot of regulatory signs like this that have the red circle with the line through it. In this case, you cannot do what's underneath there, which is cannot make a U-turn here. So in this photo, you'll see this minivan getting ready for a turn. They're allowed to turn left, but they must not make a U-turn here. They can't turn and drive in the opposite direction. Next up, the stop sign. Make a stop. Make a complete stop down to 0 miles per hour, even if nobody else is around. Then you've got to yield, and this is where you'll have to recall your right-of-way rules, which we won't cover in this chapter. We'll cover in a later one. You may also see this sign again without the word stop, just like on the stop ahead sign. They use the generic form of this. Stop sign is the only one with 8 sides. Of course, the red sign is a regulatory sign. You have to stop when you see this sign, even if there's nobody around. Next up, line 2, we got do not enter. So if you see that, you're not permitted to turn onto a street where the sign is posted. Can't do it. You can see there's some other signs there too, which we're going to get to pretty shortly here. Not permitted to go there. Plus, you may also see this sign without the words. Now, the shape is also used in European countries, different color, same shape. Do not pass. This is typically going to be a temporary sign near a construction zone. It's not always the one that's left out on the road at all times. Okay, in this case, usually near a temporary sign in a construction zone. They don't want you passing here because it's too risky for the workers who are on the side of the road. The wrong way sign. This is often paired here with the do not enter signs, usually on an entrance ramp or down for a one-way street. And it's so commonly misused that this sign was purchased and placed on the road so that you won't go the wrong way. Next up, keep right except to pass. Now this is the law everywhere in Washington State, not just on the highways. You're supposed to keep to the right unless you're passing someone. That's even on city streets, smaller streets. Keep to the right except to pass. The sign is more of a reminder. Just like this one, slower traffic, keep right. You'll usually see slower traffic in the right lane, like large trucks and other people moving more slowly. This is the law, keep right except to pass, and slower traffic should keep to the right. This is already the law, this is more of a reminder sign. Now when you get to a parking lot, you see this sign. It's going to be reserved for folks who have disabled parking permits. You may also see the road markings. This sign tells you, yes, this is a legal spot that you can get a ticket for, even though it's on private property. Just like before with the no U-turn sign, when you see the red circle with the line through it, that is a no right turn. Sometimes you'll get it paired with the do not enter and wrong way. You're not permitted to make a right turn here for whatever reason. We don't need to analyze it. Just know that you cannot make a right turn when you see this sign. Next up, the school speed limit. So it's really two signs in one. First, you're going to see the speed limit in the school zone, which statewide is 20 miles per hour unless otherwise posted. Underneath it, you're going to see a separate part of the law, the Washington Administrative Code, that says when this particular speed limit in this particular school zone is in effect. It can be when the lights are flashing. It can be only on school days from 7 to 5. It could also include when children are present. You'll need to look and see what the rules are for this particular school zone as you pass by this sign. Next up on line 4. So remember we mentioned earlier the orange signs are temporary signs. They're placed up in this case for a detour, and usually because a road is closed, or maybe just for a lane is closed, but usually with a road closed sign. You may also see the detour, again, without the words. Remember, the orange sign is temporary. In this case, it's detour. Now you may have seen this other one here, right, that looks very similar in yellow. Now this sign, they use the same arrows, the same shape. The yellow one is permanently there on the road. It tells you that all traffic is moving in one direction. The yellow signs are a permanent warning sign, where the orange ones are placed there temporarily, usually by a construction crew who is working on the roads or working on a different road. You can't go this way, temporarily detour, okay? There's a difference. Orange and yellow makes a difference. Next up, another orange sign, a flagger sign. This one's going to have someone holding a temporary stop sign, and it's a warning sign on the other side. In this case, you've got to slow down and look for a flagger. Their sign may say stop, and yes, you have to stop. It is a legal stop sign. Next up, a hospital sign. Hopefully you don't need one, but if you're looking for it, you can find it with this sign. Could be a standalone sign, could be put on an actual guide sign, like we're going to see here again in a minute. Hospital. Telephone. Now today, so many of us carry cell phones, we don't normally need these, but when you're out in the way rural area and you need to make a call to somebody, there may be a phone out there to give you some help. Sometimes you may not get a signal out there. This is where you can find a phone. Call for help if needed. You'll see these guide signs. Again, this one with a city and mileage, also more commonly found in rural areas. Tells you it's 8 miles to Bellevue, 280 miles to Spokane. Finally, in the inside back cover, we got right here the exit only optional exit. So when you see that here, if you're in that far right lane, you're going to be exiting. The entire lane is exiting here, okay? Or in the lane that has the maybe one that's highlighted with green, you can choose to go straight or you can choose to go to the right. So in the sign from the book, you can choose to go to the right to 101, but you can only go there if you're in the right lane. All right, hey, if you're ready to schedule your knowledge test, be sure to study the book first. Okay, folks who do not pass the knowledge test generally did not read the book. When you're ready, you can schedule one with us on our website, i5driving.com. Just choose a location nearest you. We're happy to answer questions you have about the knowledge test. Send us an email. Give us a call. We'd love to hear from you. Good luck.